So yeah, I've been here a long time. All that really means is I know where all the skeletons are around here. I've been here longer than most people, although Nick's been here a while as well. So I'm an entomologist by training. I run our pest management program. I also run our pesticide applicator training program. You probably have heard presentations by my program coordinator, Pat Hastings. Some of you have heard her speak? Good, okay, she works out of my office. I also have graduate students that work in a lot of different areas. My main interest is the brown marmorated stink bug. How many of you have heard of that? Okay, but I also have students that are interested in forensic entomology. Who can tell me what forensic entomology is? Anybody? Well, it's basically looking at the insects that are attracted to dead things, specifically dead bodies. We use pigs and we use beef liver in traps and so forth. We're not able to actually go and look at dead bodies to do our research, so we have alternates. Over the last 30 years, I've actually done a lot of talks about insects. As you might imagine, I've done some talks about how to identify insects, and I was telling Nick beforehand, those talks have always really been centered on one group at a time. I've never actually tried to talk about how to identify all the different groups. And that's actually really complicated to do, because when I went to graduate school, we only had 35 orders. Now we have 40. What I know is orders have been split up into suborders and whatnot. And if you don't know what that means, that's just a way we classify things. So I've attempted to put together a few very simple questions that should allow you to narrow down the scope of where an insect fits in terms of the scheme of things or the taxonomy of insects. And then once we get to those individual groups, I've got some examples and I'll talk about them that I think are things usually that we have come into our department, which I need to say we get lots of things coming into our department. And a lot of times the people have been told by the county offices to send them to us. That's fine. One thing you need to do, and you guys are probably not involved with this, but whoever sends it to them, be sure you tell people to put it in a crush-proof container. I get a lot of insects that are mailed in an envelope, and I dump it out, and there's a whole bunch of little pieces. Now, sometimes we get lucky. If it's an ant and I find an elbowed antenna, it pretty much tells me it's an ant. I won't be able to tell them what kind of ant it is, but it's pretty much going to be an ant. So we tell people that as well. Also, we get a lot of photographs, thanks to the internet and thanks to email. People need to send pictures, and you folks can feel free to send it to me if you want to. You don't know what it is. Rich Buckley, I'm sure, does the same thing because he runs the Plant Diagnostic Center, as you probably know, and they identify insects as well. Tell people it's got to be a clear picture. I'm going to show you a picture that just came in the other day, and that it's got to be a close-up. A lot of people want to take the picture from over there because they're afraid of insects. You'd be surprised how many people have entomophobia. It is an actual phobia, and there are a lot of people that are afraid of insects. Title of the talk is, What is that? And so these are some pictures of things that we get in on a regular basis. So this is my first, what is that? Anybody know? Okay, I hear centipede, I hear millipede. This is probably one of the most common thing in people's houses, unless you've got brown marmorated stink bug. It's the house centipede. And you can tell that very simply by all the legs that, when they bend, they're elevated above the body. All the other centipedes that you'll come in contact with outside, the legs are more flattened out. They don't come up above the body. And again, this is very simple. I chase these around my house all the time. Here's another, what is it? Or what is that? This is another very common one. Yes, that's the carpet beetle, and that's the larval stage of the carpet beetle. We get both of those in. This is the common carpet beetle, and then there's a black one as well. And you can possibly get either one of these into the office with somebody asking you what it is. Now, I'm not going to ask you what this is. I'm just going to tell you that when this comes in, email or in the mail itself, this is called a giant mosquito. Okay? And people want to know, does it transmit any diseases? Should I be worried about this? It looks like it can take a lot of my blood. Okay? Well, I'll get back to this later when we talk about flies as to what this really is. Here's another one. What is that? In a couple of weeks, you may begin to get calls or people coming in complaining that they have hundreds of these in their yard nesting in the ground. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. I'll cover that a little later. Here's that picture that came in it was 2 days ago actually, and I decided to put this in. The person sent this to me wanting to know if this was a tick. This is actually the pupal stage of Coleoptera maculata, the pink spotted ladybug, and I'll show you a picture of that later on. It's one of the more common ones that we have here in New Jersey. It hasn't been wiped out by the Asian ladybug yet. It's still out there. Here's another very common one. People want to know, what is that? This is also something that people will send in ticks and want to know, is this a bed bug? 10 years ago, nobody knew what a bed bug looked like. Today, unfortunately, a lot of people know what bed bugs look like. 10 years ago, one of my colleagues walked into my office with a sample somebody had sent them, actually a neighbor that lived across the street, and he had been walking around the department talking to the faculty, asking if anybody knew what this was. I was the only one who did. That's because I had to look at these when I was in graduate school. Nobody else knew it was a bed bug, which really surprised me. So most of what we get in, probably most of what you get into the offices in terms of organisms to identify that are animal, are going to be arthropods. Okay? Arthropods are a very large group of individuals. It includes the crustaceans, which are things like lobsters and crabs, and they're basically the replacement for things like insects in the marine environment. Okay? You'll get a lot of arachnids in. These are spiders. These are ticks. You might get mites in. You might get centipedes in, millipedes in. Those are all members of, not arachnids, I'm sorry, the last two. The millipedes and the centipedes, they will come in, especially if we get a summer when we get a lot of rain. The millipedes usually like to be outdoors, but when we get a lot of rain, they come indoors. And they get into people's garages, they get into people's basements, and people want to know what they are. It's really easy to tell the difference between a centipede and a millipede. You look at the number of legs per segment. Centipedes have 1 pair of legs per segment. Millipedes have 2. Centipedes also tend to be more flattened in terms of their body shape, and the millipedes tend to be more cylindrical. Easy way to tell them apart. Probably the biggest thing that's coming in, biggest thing, of course, for us that's coming in are the insects. And in terms of what we see on a regular basis, I can divide those insects into 5 basic orders. Coleoptera, which are the beetles. Diptera, which are the true flies. Hymenoptera, which are the ants, bees, and wasps. Hemelytra, which are the true bugs. These are actually the only things that we really should be calling a bug as an entomologist, and I correct my students about that all the time. Everything else is an insect except Hemelytra. And then Lepidoptera, which are the butterflies and moths. Now, how did I get into insect identification? Well, I've been doing this a very long time. And I had two interests as a kid. I was interested in sports, and I was interested in science. I was the science geek in the family. I collected a lot of things, and one of the things I collected was insects. And so I've had an insect collection since I was in 3rd grade. And my wife is very happy when I don't bring any insects home at the end of the night. I still collect. So I'm a lifelong collector. What that means is I've spent a lot of time trying to identify insects. Okay, and if you do it for 30 years, it gets very simple to do most of the time. I can pretty much, as long as I now have my glasses, look at that, and I know at least what family it is just by looking at it, and a lot of times I know what genus and species it is. I have had a formal course in insect taxonomy. I'm going to talk a little bit about the textbook because it's a really good reference if you want to spend $140. Unfortunately, it's a college textbook, and they are expensive, but it's a really good book to have. And actually having that kind of information, the more you can have, the better off you're going to be. And so this is my first entomology book, Golden Guide to Insects, back in the 60s. And so the yellow version is the one I had. The new version is that orange one there. And it does a pretty good job of introducing someone to all the general groups of insects and some of the insects within that. And so as a kid, my lifelong ambition was to collect every insect that was in the book. I was lucky enough to live in California, and then lucky enough to live the second half of my childhood in the East Coast, and I did a really good job of getting almost every insect in there, and that's probably the reason why I'm an entomologist today. A little bit better than Golden Guides are the Peterson series. These are just 4 of the ones that I have. There's one on insects, there's one on eastern butterflies, there's ones on butterflies of North America, west of the Mississippi. There's a guide to moths, there's a guide to beetles as well. If for no other reason than to be able to look at pictures, these books are very, very good, okay? And I use them all the time because every once in a while I get something I have no idea what it is in terms of what specific insect it is. All the different groups that they talk about, and the groups are broken up by order and then by family, unless it's one of the specific books like the beetles, and then that's all divided by families. They tell you what the characteristics are for that family, and then they have key individuals that most people are interested in knowing about within that family, what they do, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. There's also a lot of good websites out there. My students told me about What's That Bug? It's something that you can submit a question to or a picture to, and it's manned by graduate students and expert entomologists that they basically are going to try and tell you what that is. And usually it comes back very quickly. And so there's a whole bunch of people out there doing that. Bugguide.net is another very good one, and insect identification is good. And then state extension websites. I'll just remind you, here at Rutgers, we have a whole lot of fact sheets that deal with individual insects that have information that if you get it to say it's a brown marmorated stink bug, you can download our fact sheet and send it to whoever the person asking is, if it's an email as a PDF. So there's good information out there on the internet. There's also bad, so be just a little careful. This is the one that I use. This is probably the classic identification guide for students going to graduate school to become an entomologist in our taxonomy course. It is full of lots of general information about insects. The thing that it has that the Peterson guides don't have is what we call a dichotomous key. That's a key divided into couplets of 2 that ask you questions, and based on your answer, it sends you to another part of the key. The keys that they have in here can get an insect down to order, and then once you're within an order, it provides keys to get the insects down to the family that they belong to, okay? And to use this key, you do need a microscope, okay? It doesn't need to be a fancy high power microscope, a binocular scope that's good to at least 25x is probably good enough to do what you need to do with this book. And so I have it. When I first bought it, it was the 3rd edition. It's now up to the 7th edition. And this is what we use in our taxonomy class today. So what I've tried to do, and the rest of the talk is going to be talking about a simple key that I've tried to put together to help you get insects down to, first, is it an insect? And 2, what order of insect is it? Okay? And if you can use this and get it there, you can use some of those other books to help you get down farther. And so the first question, and I've set this up like a dichotomous key, is it an arthropod? I think most everybody's familiar with those things that I mentioned as being an arthropod. If it's not one of those, the answer is probably going to be no. And then you stop if they want to know if it's an insect, okay? So that would be, you're done with the key. If it is an arthropod, then it directs you to go to question 2. So question 2, as far as I'm concerned, when I look at these things, is does it have wings? That tells me a lot. If it has wings, it is an insect. Insects are the only organisms that have wings that are not bats or birds. Okay? So that makes it really easy, because most of the insect groups, as adults, they have wings of some type. There are some exceptions. And so this also, I need to say, just works for the adults. So does it have wings? If the answer is no, I go to question 3. That's the next basic question about how to identify whether it's an insect, is how many legs does it have? Okay? Insects all have 6 legs as adults. Okay? They don't have 8. Those are mites, ticks, and spiders, with the caveat that in the first juvenile stage, mites and ticks only have 6. After that, they have 8. But insects only have 6. Millipedes, centipedes have a great deal more, so do the crustaceans and so forth. And so if it didn't have wings and I went here, it had more than 6, I'm done. It's not an insect. I've answered my question. If it has less than 6, then I go to 4. That then asks, how many body regions does it have? This is to help get past that. Is it a mite, tick, the first stage, or an insect? Mites and ticks only have 2 body parts. They have a cephalothorax and an abdomen. Insects have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. They have 3 body sections. So that's the next thing that you can use to decide whether it's an insect. And if it does, that's the only thing it can be. Okay, that makes it really easy. Now let's go back to the wings. If it does have wings, yes, it's an insect, and then you move to question 5, which is I've set up to be a question about what kind of wings does it have. It's a Cecropia moth. It's one of my favorite insects. It's a beautiful moth that we have here in the East. But question 5 asks, well, what kind of wings does it have? Well, that moth has what we call scaly wings. They're basically modified hairs that are colored, and they coat that. And if you've ever collected one and you rub your fingers on the wings accidentally and color comes off on your fingers, those are the scales coming off the wings. Without the scales, the wings are perfectly clear. Okay? So what does it have? Well, there are several different options here, and I'm going to go through each of these. First one I have here is, are they Tegmina? And probably nobody knows what that means, and I'm going to tell you. Do they have Hemelytra? Do they have elytra? Do they have scaly wings or hairy wings? Because sometimes the scales can be modified into what look like hairs. Does it have membranous wings, which basically means are they clear? Or do they have no wings at all? Because there are some insects that do not have wings as adults. Okay, and so we need to know that here as well. So let's figure out what a Tegmina is. Tegmina is basically what we call leathery wings. They're kind of translucent in some of them, the groups. They are not translucent in others, but they are leathery wings. Okay, And the best example that I have are these cockroaches here. You can see that those wings are dark in color. You can't see through them. And they literally do look like leather, okay? So there are a number of groups that have Tegmina. Blattodea, Gryllidae, Mantidae, Orthoptera, and Phasmantidae. When I went to graduate school, Orthoptera included the Blattodea and the Gryllidae. And so I'm going to tell you what those are now. So Blattodea are the cockroaches, everybody's favorite insect. In an entomology department, it's a fact of life. We have these running around my building all the time because we have people that study cockroaches. They have colonies. They get out. And so we can't put down any kind of insecticide because we might kill some of the insects we want to keep alive. But these are the most common ones that will probably come in. That's the American cockroach in the upper left-hand corner. The one directly next to it, that is the German cockroach. And the one on the bottom is the brown-banded cockroach. You can tell brown bandeds and you can tell German cockroaches apart by the way the stripes go. So in the German, the stripes go the length of the body. In the brown banded, the stripes go across the body. And probably the ones that you'll get in that people usually have are the Germans and the brown bandits today. It's not the Americans. Americans really easy to tell. It's 3 times bigger than the other twos. Gryllidae are the crickets, okay? So on your upper left, that is a house cricket. This is the cricket that people use to feed things like lizards if they keep lizards. It's also what they're grinding up and putting in cricket flour today. Everybody familiar with cricket flour? It actually, you can't tell the difference between that and regular flour. It tastes very good. And it's supposed to be more nutritious. In the upper right, that's a cave. Oh, you need a talk on entomophaga. It would really intrigue you. That insect in the upper right is a cave cricket or a camel cricket. Very common in people's basements that have a moisture problem. I have them in my basement. They do no damage. They feed on the moss and algae and whatnot that is living on the moisture that's down there. But they're a nuisance. You can get very large populations of them. They're very easy to tell. They have this humped back appearance looking at the sides and these very large hind legs. And they jump pretty well. If you pick it up and the legs fall off, it's definitely a camel or a cave cricket. They're very fragile. And so my students go crazy trying to get one for their collection that comes intact. The little green one on the lower left, that's a tree cricket. And so if you sit out at night and you hear the chirping in the trees, it's either a tree cricket or a snowy tree cricket. The tree crickets are green, the snowy crickets are white. That's an easy way to tell them apart. And they do get attracted to people's lights at night. And so that means if they open their porch door to go in and out, it's possible they come in, and that's how they end up in our office. They want to know what it is and where it came from. The last one here is a field cricket, that little black one on the lower right. If you go outside and turn over leaves, turn over rocks, you'll find these. These are also get into people's houses, and you usually hear a solitary male going chirp, 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 and you're running around trying to find it. Well, that chirping is, he's calling for a female, so he can find somebody to mate with. Mantidae are the mantids, the praying mantids. We have 2 here in the United States. One is native. It's a very little tiny one. It's only a couple of inches long, and it can be either brown or green. The one that most people are familiar with is the one here, that, as you can tell from the one that's sitting in that person's hand, is quite large. That's a Chinese mantis, okay? It is a non-native individual. It's been here so long that people don't realize that it's not a native insect here, but it is. It's not a problem, so it's not invasive. It's not like the stink bug that's causing all the problems. But a lot of people want to use these for biocontrol instead of spraying pesticides. We don't recommend that. They are a generalist predator. They will eat anything they can get their hands on. They don't care if it's a honeybee or whether it's a stink bug or anything else. Literally, and I didn't realize this until one of my students said, you got to see this. If you go to YouTube and you type in hummingbird eating praying mantis, they will actually try, and they can catch them. They can't eat them, but they can catch them, and there's pictures of them holding on to it. Unfortunately, we have some insects that mimic hummingbirds. So we have some sphinx moths, hawk moths, and actually the adults of things like the tomato hornworm are hummingbird mimics, and the praying mantis, in my opinion, thinks that that's what they're catching, and then they find out that it's a bird. So I guess, you know, they have some issues, but generally speaking, they're not bad guys. Here are the typical Orthoptera, your typical shorthorn grasshopper. That's the one that most people are familiar with up there in the upper left. Then we have a katydid, which is, the other name for it is a longhorned grasshopper. Okay, its antennae are longer than the length of its body. And then the one on the bottom here is what we call a conehead. We called it conehead before Saturday Night Live. But it has that conical shape to the head. It has long antennae, and so we call it a conehead. The ones that do the most damage are the shorthorns. This is also the ones, if you read about the migratory locusts out in Africa and whatnot, it's a different species than one we have here, but they're shorthorned grasshoppers. So that's the most common one in terms of being a pest. Phasmantidae are the walking sticks. We do have them here in New Jersey. They like wooded areas. They are very hard to find, but they are out there. They do no damage. Their goal in life is not to be eaten, and they attempt that by looking like a stick. And they will sit there motionless for hours. They're fun to watch. You can blow on them and they'll sway just a little bit, but they really aren't going to try and move at all. They tend to be brown in color, although this one's got some color on it in terms of green. If you go to other parts of the world, though, they take on a lot of different shapes. This is a tropical stick insect, tropical walking stick, and it is trying to mimic leaves and sticks that have different shapes than what ours does. There's another one out there as well, a leaf bug. It's basically a walking stick where its body is green and it looks like a great big leaf. And so they can take on lots of different shapes. What's a Hemelytra? Very easy. If you look at the wings, the upper part of the wing is solid in nature, and the lower part of the wing is membranous in nature. And so this is the key characteristic for the Hemiptera, the true bugs. All right, again, that group that, as an entomologist, is the only one I call bugs. Another tip-off is that this whole group, every individual in it has sucking mouth parts. So these feed on plant juices and other types of things. Mouth parts similar to what we considered with a mosquito, except that they don't feed on blood, most of them anyway, and they feed on plants. So here is one group that doesn't eat plants. Assassin bugs are predators, and there's a picture of one up there in the top left that is captured a Hymenoptera and a wasp, and it's feeding on it. It's basically sucking all the juices out of that insect, and it'll be dead when it's done. The one here on your upper right, that is a wheel bug. Students think these are really cool, and they want to have colonies, and I tell them, be very careful. The adults can inflict a very painful bite, and they will bite you if you handle them, and it hurts. I know from personal experience. But they are really common here in New Jersey, and they're easy to tell because if you look at the top of the thorax, it has that wheel, spiky wheel shape. That's a key characteristic for that species. And again, that's a wheel bug. The one down in the lower part of the slide, that is a triatoma bug. It was in the news last year. Unfortunately, a newspaper published that we had these in the eastern United States, and that they're bloodsuckers and that they transmit Chagas disease. We don't have any individuals in the east that transmit Chagas disease. If you go to the southwest, though, they have these bugs. They're called kissing bugs. That's the common name for them. They're nocturnal, and they're called kissing bugs because when most people sleep, the only thing that's exposed is the head. And they will crawl up and insert their mouth parts into the soft tissues in the lips and draw blood. Now, if you live in parts of Mexico and you live in parts of South America, that can be a problem because they do transmit Chagas disease, which is a nasty disease. And so, you know, we don't have them here, but they are out there. Boxelder bugs. This is an insect that nobody knows about until the fall. Like a lot of other insects, the Asian ladybugs, the brown marmorated stink bug, it's one that likes to congregate on the southern sides of houses, sometimes moving inside, usually not, but people freak out because there can be hundreds of them on their side of their house, and they're concerned it's going to damage the house, it's going to come in. It's very easy to tell. If you get it to Hemelytra, the coloration and the pattern of the red striping gives it away that it's a boxelder bug. Lace bugs. These are neat little creatures. They're called lace bugs, obviously, because of the way those wings are arranged, and they look like lacy patterns. We have several different species. What species comes in is very easy to tell. Just ask, what plant did it come off of? Because if it came off an azalea, it's an azalea lace bug. If it came off of Andromeda, it's an Andromeda lace bug. If it fell off an oak tree onto your car, it's an oak lace bug. They're species specific to what they feed on. So each one of those I mentioned is a different species. So it's really easy, just ask what it came off of. We do worry about these in things like Andromeda. We do worry about these in azaleas, mostly azaleas. Usually it's a problem because the azalea plant's planted in the wrong place. It's mulched and it's in full sun. That heats up the roots, that stresses the plant, and so the feeding by them, because they remove the juices out of the plants, causes it to go into distress. And I have seen azaleas that have such heavy populations that they're dying and they're not going to come back. If you can't see the lace bugs, turn the leaves over, you'll see little black spots. That's their poop. That's another indication, at least in the field, that they've got lace bugs. Here's a leaf-footed bug. Okay, it gets its name because of this wide-in part of the legs back here that looks like a leaf structure. These don't normally cause any problems, but there's one species that got introduced into the eastern United States from the northwest, the western conifer seed bug. It's another one that likes to come inside in the wintertime, although it doesn't come inside in very large numbers because they don't get to large population size. Here's a milkweed bug. I just throw this in because it looks like a boxelder bug to most people, but if you look at the color pattern and striping, it is different, okay? And this isn't a pest. It only feeds on milkweed, and we give them out at Rutgers Day to the students that win our cockroach race, and they get to take it home, and Mom and Dad freak out, but they get to take them home and learn a little bit about how insects grow and live. Here's the bug I work with. Today, most people know what this is. Back in the mid-90s, nobody knew what it was. It has now spread all over the U.S. It is now also in 13 countries in Europe. It is damaging the wine grapes and the peach crop in northern Italy. It's an Asian species, so it's not native to any of those species. And so it's actually spread all over the world now. Good news is, in New Jersey at least, the populations have been dwindling since 2010. What's an elytra? Well, think of a beetle. If you look at a beetle, the four wings are hardened covers. And when they open them up, there's this membranous wing that unfolds. So if you can remember a beetle, that's what an elytra looks like. So that's what that question is asking about. We have two groups, the Coleoptera, which are the beetles, and then the Dermaptera also have elytra. And so some common ones that we have, hopefully everybody knows the one there on the left. That's the Colorado potato beetle. The adult is in the upper picture. The larvae are in the lower picture. Colorado potato beetle's scientific name is Lepidoptera decimlineata. Decimlineata means it has 10 lines on its elytra. And if you count them, there's 10 stripes there. Okay? And there's a couple of other beetles that look familiar, look similar. Count the lines. If it's 10, it's Colorado potato beetle. They feed on nightshades. And so agricultural-wise, they're a problem on eggplant, tomatoes, and potatoes. I usually say that potatoes are filet mignon, okay? Eggplant is a New York strip, and tomatoes are hamburger. That's the order in which they prefer to feed on those plants. But they feed on just about any nightshade. And so we get them in, I get emails about this. You know, I put eggplant in my backyard garden for the first time, and these beetles showed up. Where did they come from? I don't live anywhere near a farm. Well, there are lots of nightshades out there in the woods. One of the most common one is horse nettle. Okay, they will feed on horse nettle, and so they're out there they're feeding on horse nettle and some of the other things, and then we bring something in that they really like. Okay, and that's why they come, and that's why they're there. This is also an insect that isn't non-native. It's native to South and Central and North America. So it's been here a while. The beetles there in the middle, that's Coleoptera maculata that I mentioned earlier. That's the pink spotted ladybug. It's a very good predator of aphids and all sorts of insect eggs and whatnot. It's very common in agricultural areas and fields where they don't do a lot of spraying. Okay. And then that larva underneath, that's the juvenile stage. The growers call them alligator bugs because they think they look like alligators. Okay. Now, hopefully, although I know some of you may have already seen this, the one there on the far right, that's a new invader. It's only been here in the state a couple of years. That's the emerald ash borer. Okay. It's a threat to just about all the ash trees that we have here in New Jersey and everywhere else around us. We're the last one in this area to get it in terms of a state. It's in Burlington County. It's in southern, Somerset County. It's been found in Middlesex County, and it's been found up in Bergen County. So if you get a little green, metallic-looking beetle that's cylindrical in shape, please call the Department of Agriculture, or call me, or call your county extension office. They all know about, well, you're in the extension office, so tell your county agent about it, okay? Because the State Department of Ag is trying to figure out how far this has gotten out into the state. Because, now that it's here, we're actually in a quarantine. We can't move any ash out of the state anymore to an area where they've not found emerald ash borer. So this is a new one. That's what the larvae looks. And so if you've got an ash tree that is in decline, if you peel the bark back and you see these little serpentine feeding shapes in there, or you see a little white larvae that has a brown round head, that's possibly emerald ash borer. Now there are other borers similar that come in, but that's after the tree has had problems. These they'll kill the tree fairly quickly. Here's a Dermaptera. This is an earwig. Most people have never seen these, although we have them in my greenhouse. They like to hide under the pots, moist area. They like that. They're predaceous, so they feed on other insects. It's an old wives' tale that they crawl into people's ears at night and feed on earwax. But because people used to believe that, they're called earwigs. Okay, very easy to tell. They have the Hemelytra, which, well, there we go, right there. Okay, those are those hardened wing covers. But they also have these very large pincers on the back end of the insect, the adult, and so that's how you tell it's an earwig and not a beetle, because there are a couple of beetles that look very similar to it. Okay, scaly, hairy wings. These are the Lepidoptera and Plecoptera. Those are the only two orders that fall into this category. Lepidoptera, of course, are the butterflies and the moths. And I've got a picture of a monarch. Hopefully everybody knows what that is. The one below that, that's a question mark. It's called a question mark because if you look at the outer margins of the wings, it looks like it's sculptured like a question mark when it's folded up. That's a tomato hornworm, or that could be a tobacco hornworm. Okay, they both look very similar. You're probably familiar with them because of the big green larvae that feed on tomatoes, can take out a tomato plant fairly quickly. My only suggestion is, and if you see something like this picture, if they've got these little white cocoons on them, don't kill it, don't get rid of it. Those are parasitic wasps. That's the pupal stage of a parasitic wasp that attacks them. It's pretty much dead right now. It's paralyzed, it's not feeding, it's stopped. If you get rid of it when they hatch, they won't be in the right environment to go find others and attack them. So that picture is a good thing. All right, Trichoptera, caddisflies. This is seasonal. Caddisflies, as juveniles, are aquatic. They live in streams primarily, although you do find them in ponds, so they have to be associated with water. And if you have high populations of these in the streams and in the ponds, they can emerge out of that in extremely large numbers, okay? And so that's a problem for somebody living next to one of those two types of water structures. And they are attracted to lights at night. And so we get complaints, what is this? It's coming in, and then we only see it at night. They're attracted to the lights. I open my door, and I get 30, 40 of them coming in the door. Well, easy way to get rid of them, because there isn't anything labeled to spray, is to turn the lights off. Okay? Turn the outdoor light off. Even interior lights can attract them, but that's really the only thing I can tell them, other than it's a caddisfly, and tell them what I just told you. If you're a fly fisherman, you love that when it comes off in large numbers because the fish go crazy. Membranous wings. We have lots of different orders where the insects have membranous wings. Diptera, the flies, Ephemeroptera, Homoptera, although it's asterisked because there are some Homopterans that do not have wings. Hymenoptera, the wasps and the bees and the ants, Nueroptera, Megaloptera, Odonata, Plecoptera, and Thysanoptera. So there's a lot, and these are just the major ones. There are others. These are the ones I think you'd probably come across with samples that might come into the county office. Here's my giant mosquito again. I put it up here because this has wings, of course, but the key characteristic for being a fly is that it only has what people consider wings for forewings, the front wings. The second pair of wings are there, but they're modified. We call them halteres, and if you see those little balls that look like they're on stalks, that's its hind wings. They use them basically as gyroscopes for body positioning while they're flying and whatnot. Now, By the shaking of heads, I think all of you realize this is not a giant mosquito. This is a crane fly, okay? They are semi-aquatic as juveniles, so they can live in standing water and turf areas and whatnot. They are attracted to lights, like a lot of insects, so they come to the lights at night. You open the door, they get inside, and oh my goodness, we've got a giant mosquito and it's going to suck all my blood. No, they're predaceous. They feed on other insects, both the juveniles and adults, and they cannot bite you and I. They don't have sucking mouth parts. Here's a hoverfly or a syrphid fly. These are also good guys. The juveniles of these feed on aphids and other kinds of soft-bodied insects. Most people see these at their flowers and think they are bees. They are bee mimics. That's their defense, to look like a bee, and something won't eat me if they think I'm a bee because I might be able to sting them. But they're good guys, and we do things to get them in situations where they can help us in agricultural fields. Mayflies. This doesn't do anything. This is an adult mayfly. This is actually called a coffin fly. Don't ask me why, other than it's yellow and white. And if you're up in the Catskills this time of year at night, they're all over the place and the fish go crazy. This adult mayfly is unique because it's the only group that has a pre-reproductive stage. Its juvenile stage is aquatic, just like the Trichoptera. When they emerge, that stage that comes out of the water goes to trees. It sits there for a while, and then it molts to a final reproductive stage, and then they go mate. And it's the only group that does that. This is another one that's really only a problem because it's attracted to lights. So again, if you live near a stream that has high populations of mayflies, you can get lots and lots of them coming to the house light. And again, they get inside and people get concerned. But they don't bite. In fact, they don't even have mouth parts as adults. So that light attraction is really the only problem, and we do get calls about them. Homoptera. Lots of different types of insects. Lots of them are pests. This is one of the main ones in greenhouses. These are whiteflies. Okay, I just lost a whole crop of peppers because I couldn't spray them because we had whiteflies. I tried the biocontrol and I let the populations get too high before I brought the biocontrol agents in, and all my plants died. So they're sucking insects. They can take out a lot of fluids out of the plant, but they also transmit some diseases. And some of the species are actually resistant to the insecticides that we use. Scale insects. That's another one. This one is a Homoptera. It doesn't have wings except the males. And so this is San Jose scale. And our growers don't normally treat for this because it's controlled by natural enemies. But because of the stink bug and all the spraying that they're doing now because of the stink bug, we're killing off all the natural enemies. And so this is now a problem again when it hasn't been for 40 years. And so there's a lot of people, and including people here at Rutgers, are trying to figure out a way to manage the stink bug so we can go back to not having this as a problem and having to spray more things. Here's another very common one. In a couple of weeks, people will start to see these. If they don't see these, they will definitely hear them. This is the annual cicada, okay? It starts to come out in late June, early July. They'll be there into August. You'll hear them singing in the trees. Again, those are males calling for females. And it's ID'd by the clear wings and the green and black pattern on them. And again, they are out every year. We have multiple broods, but the brood only takes 3 to 5 years. As opposed to this one, this is the periodical cicada. This is the 17-year cicada. Okay, I think we had a small outbreak in Princeton this year. We did have an outbreak in other parts of the East. Our big brood is a 17-year brood in Princeton, and we've discovered this year that we didn't realize there's a 13-year brood as well. So they can be 13 years, they can be 17 years. But I have not gotten a single call about them, So the brood must be very small. The only people that called me were the news people, because I heard they were a problem down in Maryland and wanted to know. Now, if you compare the two, aside from the difference in the number of years it takes them to become adults, there's quite a bit difference in the color pattern, okay? Orange veins in the wings. It's a bluish black in terms of the body, and it's got red eyes. It's very different. So it's easy to tell the two apart. And again, the green one is the one we have every year. Next group is Hymenoptera. Ants are an exception to the winged rule. Most people come in contact with ants because they're crawling around in their house, and there are several species that will do that. And when the males and the females emerge, usually in the springtime or the late fall, they emerge, they go off and mate, and then the females drop their wings and go start another colony. Now, the one that most people are concerned about is this one. This is a carpenter ant. We have two types in New Jersey. We have red carpenter ants and we have black carpenter ants. The black ones are the ones that come inside the house. And they're easy to tell. You look at body size, although they do have different sizes. But that blue arrow is pointing to a knob that sticks up on the constriction area between the abdomen and the thorax. If it's got that knob, it's probably a carpenter ant. Again, easy to tell. Nueroptera, lace wings on the left, the adult on top, the juvenile on the bottom. These are good guys. That juvenile feeds on eggs, it feeds on aphids and any other soft-bodied insect that it can find. The adults feed on nectar and pollen. We get calls, another insect that comes to light in the Nueroptera, that's an antlion adult. Some people think it's a damselfly. It does look somewhat like a damselfly because of the delicate nature of the wings and how it flies. The interesting part is the larvae. That's the one that I played with as a kid. They make a cone in sand, they sit at the bottom and they wait for an insect. And you can actually throw an ant in there and the ant tries to get out, they kick the sand up to knock it back down in to get to the jaws, and then they eat it, which is kind of interesting. Okay, Megaloptera, that's a Dobson fly. That's a Dobson fly adult male. That is a female. Notice the difference. Dobson flies are like deer. The males have ornaments that they fight with. They can't bite. People are afraid of these because they think that male can bite them. The one you need to worry about is the female. She's the one that can bite. And that's the juvenile stage. This is another aquatic. They come out in July. They come out in large numbers, and they will go to sides of structures, sometimes people's houses. That's when I get a call. They come out of that juvenile skin as these adults, and people get very upset. If you're a fisherman and you fish for trout, that juvenile is what's called in bait stores a hellgrammite. Again, that's the juvenile stage. Onata, this is the dragonflies and the damselflies. They are all predaceous. They eat other insects, so they are good guys. They are unique because they join in this kind of fashion to mate. And the female, they transfer a packet of sperm to the female. And the male grabs a hold of the female and flies around with her while she's doing that. Plecoptera, stoneflies, doesn't cause any problems. However, it's another aquatic one that when it comes out, periodically during the year, it's attracted to lights, and there could be hundreds of them. Again, people get concerned because they don't know what it is. Thysanoptera, tiny little insects. They have rasping, sucking mouth parts. They are problems in greenhouses. They are problems in certain crops. They're very small. Some of the species are predatory and eat the plant-feeding ones, and they can transmit diseases. So there's a lot of them that don't have wings. That's everything else, and I've got pictures here of a columbella. This is a springtail. We only get calls about this in very dry years, and they come inside looking for moisture, and people want to know what it is. Termites, hopefully everybody knows that that's a lice. This is Socopteran. That is a book or bark lice. They can be problems in libraries. They like to eat the starch in the pages and in the binding glue, and they can be a problem in old books. That's an adult flea. Adult flea is the only stage that feeds on blood. The only one that will bite us is the cat flea and live off of us. Others will bite, but they can't live off of us. Fleas are most famous because of transmitting bubonic plague. And they can do this. They do it in the Southwest. We don't really have a lot of problem with it here, although it is possible. And then this one here, that's a Thysanoptera, that's a silverfish. And so, yeah, I won't say much about silverfish. It looks like you all know what that is. Okay, termites, everybody's familiar with this. Most people don't know they have termites until that winged adult. It's like ants, the winged males and females emerge out of the wood in the house or the patio or whatnot. They fly off, they mate, and then the females go start more colonies. Usually the nest for these can be in the house, but it can also be outside the house. These are the different lice. These used to be two groups. Now we call them Phthiraptera. We have sucking lice and we have chewing lice. The ones that we worry about are the sucking lice. This is a body louse. That's a crab louse or a pubic louse. This is the chewing one. Very easy to tell. The chewing lice have this triangular head. The other ones have a more conical head. And you may get calls about this. They tend to come from elementary schools. They tend to have problems. And it doesn't matter if it's in Princeton or whether it's in Newark. I've had calls from all of them. One child comes in with them, and the kids share stuff, and it gets passed around. It takes a while to get rid of it, but it is easily to get rid of. And my suggestion would be don't buy any of the over-counter stuff. Go to your doctor. They can prescribe something that'll work better. It's a shampoo. But I'm going to leave you with one of my questions for you. Does anybody know what insect this is? Very good. It's a spotted lanternfly. This is an invasive. This has been introduced into Pennsylvania right across the river in Bucks County up into Allentown. If somebody comes in, it's a Homoptera. It feeds on apple trees and some other things. If somebody comes in with something that looks like that, please call the Department of Ag or call me, because we're very interested in seeing if it comes across. If you want to go looking for it, and there are lots of people out there looking for it because it's so pretty, go find Tree of Heaven. This insect has to feed on Tree of Heaven to survive. So if we could take down every Tree of Heaven in the country, we wouldn't have a problem with this insect. That's not going to happen. So if you want to go looking for it, Tree of Heaven is the place to look.